Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, after a lavish wedding and generous gifts, OP's wife's affair with an artist was discovered through emails left open on a shared computer. At the Artist Gallery event, he exposed the affair publicly, leading to his wife's career downfall and her departure from town. Despite the pain, he agrees with her advice against forgiving infidelity. Now let's get into the story. My wife and I had been dating for several years before I popped the question, and she agreed to marry me. That moment was one of the most beautiful moments we shared. As you'd imagine, our wedding was big and the talk of the town. Our friends, enemies, family, and even strangers were there. My father even gifted us a house. He was into real estate, so it was nothing to him. With our marriage, my ex-wife's fame grew, and she even moved from speaking only on the radio to being hosted on television too. Even when we moved into our new house, I bought a lot of art pieces from a particularly fast-growing artist, and my ex-wife was crazy about his works just to make her happy. In fact, from the day we met at the party, everything I did after that day was to make my ex-wife happy. I didn't argue with her when she said she didn't want kids yet. For the first year of our marriage, we were happy. We enjoyed each other's company a lot, and we were best friends. Even if we argued about something, we had a rule of never going to bed without settling it, which helped us a lot in bonding. She was the relationship coach and knew how to make our marriage work. Everything was going on fine between us until one day. We all had our separate laptops, but there was a home computer anyone could use in case we forgot our laptops at the office or anything. Also, I can't recall when my wife used the home computer last because she was always with her laptop. That day, I received a call from a client who had sent me an email that needed a quick response. Unfortunately, I left my laptop at my father's house that afternoon, so the only option was to use the home computer since it was closest to me. As soon as I opened the email, I realized that my wife forgot to log out of her Gmail account the last time she used the home computer. Maybe she didn't think I would use it because I rarely did. I was someone who liked being organized. I also noticed a particular email that kept messaging her, and I figured it was the fast-growing artist I bought most of our artwork from. It didn't feel right because he sent more than 5 messages daily, and I was curious about what there were. At first, I believed he was trying to sell her new art pieces or sending reminders, but when I opened the emails, I was shocked by my bone marrow. Maybe if I was older, I would have had a heart attack that day. Just kidding. I was shocked and disappointed to see that my wife and the artist she raved about were having an affair, and it started 3 months after we got married. My disappointment was worse than the news of my first wife's death. Instead of responding to the email I was supposed to, I sat there and went through all of their conversations. It was heartbreaking to read, but I also remembered getting an invitation from the artist to attend his gallery opening. I knew it would be a perfect time to disgrace them, so I acted like nothing was wrong and forwarded all of their conversation to my email address. His opening was only 3 days away, giving me enough time to do what I wanted. Before the opening day, I reached out to him and asked if I could give a speech at his opening, and he was elated. I knew he would agree because I bought art pieces from him that ran into millions of dollars. When D-Day came, I arrived at the location with my wife, and I still acted like everything was fantastic between us. She didn't suspect anything because she was used to my mood swings and must have thought I was not in a good mood those past days. And because he was a famous artist, almost half of the town was at the location. We exchanged pleasantries as expected, and when it was time for me to give the speech, I asked if I could display a collage of all the beautiful art pieces I had bought from him, and he nodded excitedly. To everyone's surprise, I projected a collage of all the conversations between my ex-wife and the artist. When she saw it, her glass fell out of her hands, and everyone's eyes turned to her and her lover. She was very embarrassed, and she ran out of the hall. I also left, and a lot of people followed me. Before we left the house, I ordered some people to move her things from the house to her parents' house. I'm sure her parents might have noticed that I was a little bit too busy. Must have called her to find out why, because she never showed up at my house again. She was too embarrassed to even beg. In the days that followed, my ex-wife got the worst online and newspaper lashing of her life. She made the local newspaper headlines, and everyone in town talked about her. It was funny because she advised people whose spouses cheated on them to never take back their cheating spouse. In her radio sessions, she talked down on cheaters and cheating itself. There's no asking if her career ended, because it did. She got fired, and she lost the respect she once had. On the other hand, her lover's reputation was ruined. He lost a lot of followers and didn't make any sales at his gallery opening. Also, the same day I found out about their affair, I started processing my divorce papers, and we divorced shortly after. After our divorce, she moved out of town because she could not bear the shame anymore. It's been 2 years, and I haven't seen her since. It still hurts me because I loved her so much. But like she said, cheating spouses don't deserve a second chance. Her words, not mine. Today's second story. In this story, Opie believed he had a strong marriage with his wife of 7 years. They had always planned to build a life together and start a family once financially stable. However, their attempts to conceive failed due to his wife's infertility. Suspecting something amiss, he discovered his wife's affair with her boss and meticulously gathered evidence to expose them publicly. Despite the painful ordeal, he prioritized his own well-being and ultimately pursued a new life in Oregon. Now let's get into the story. I, 35 male, thought I had a solid marriage with my wife, 33 female, of 7 years. We had built a life together, and I believed in the strength of our bond. We met in our early 20s and instantly knew we would be together forever. We are both very career-driven people and have always discussed having children. Because of the financial commitment involved, we wanted to wait until we were on solid ground before trying. About a year before all of this, we began trying to have a baby, but my wife was infertile, so we couldn't have one naturally. I wanted to discuss other options, but she seemed to be uninterested in any other alternatives and shut me out completely. She was the love of my life, so I wanted us to fix things, but she denied every suggestion for counseling or therapy. Recently, things took a turn for the worse. My wife started exhibiting suspicious behavior, being secretive with her phone, working late more often, and growing more emotionally distant. I had a gut feeling something was going on, but I didn't want to believe it. A close friend told me it might be nice to surprise her one day because she was working late, and I thought about bringing dinner to cheer her up. I thought it was a great idea, so I stopped by her favorite restaurant and then made my way over. What I thought would be a romantic gesture ended with me discovering her in a compromising situation with none other than her boss. It was a shocking sight that left me heartbroken and angry. They were too busy with each other in her office to even notice me. I knew right away that was the end of our relationship. I dropped the food in the trash can and stormed out of her office. On the drive back home, I thought about what I was going to do. I thought about confronting her and demanding me to force, but I knew that if I did, she would try and get spousal support from me. I knew that I needed to catch her in the act with evidence. Over the next few days, I crafted a plan to expose their affair. I was angry with her, so I wanted to ensure they faced the consequences of their actions, and I wanted our families to know the truth. First, I enlisted the help of a close friend who happened to be a talented videographer. We set up hidden cameras in my house to capture evidence of the affair. Shortly after setting up the cameras, I told my wife that I had an emergency business meeting and would be out of town for the weekend. She didn't ask any questions. She even seemed excited. There was no doubt in my mind that she was falling right into my trap and planned on inviting her boss over to our house. I rented a room at a hotel and waited until my trip was over, killing time by working with my divorce lawyer to get the papers prepped. When I got back home, I checked the tapes and confirmed that I did have the proper evidence to move on with the next phase of my plan. I pretended like everything was normal and went about my daily activities. Our anniversary was coming up, so I figured that was the perfect time to get some of our family and friends together. I sent invitations to over a dozen people, telling them that I was throwing a surprise anniversary brunch for my wife. I received a lot of excited RSVPs almost immediately, with people promising not to mention anything to her. On the day of the brunch, everybody loaded into our house. I set up a large banquet table with catered food, mimosas, and Bloody Marys. Everyone seems to be enjoying themselves. My wife had a bright look in her eyes similar to when we first met, and I could see that the gesture impressed her quite a bit. That made the second half of the brunch even more rewarding to me. With the help of my friend, we put together a video to show the party. The first half of the video was a collage of our marriage, wedding photos, videos of the two of us being stupid and in love, you name it. If the second half didn't feature my wife in bed with her boss, it would have been really sweet. When everyone realized what was happening, shock and disbelief filled the room. Some family members were stunned into silence, while others erupted in anger. It was an explosive moment to say the least. While the chaos erupted around me, I couldn't help but look at my wife's face and savor the humiliation. It seemed cruel, and even then I felt a little guilty. But I wanted her to feel the way I did when I found her sleeping with her boss. My wife stormed out, telling me that she never wanted to see me again. Before she could leave, I told her that I felt the exact same way and handed her an envelope with the divorce papers inside. As expected, she did try to fight me during the divorce proceedings, but with the evidence that I had, she was unable to get anything from me. However, I did let her keep the house because I didn't want to live in the same place where I caught her sleeping with her cheating. I had actually been wanting to move to Oregon for a long time, so without her constant refusal, I was finally able to go. Today's third story. In this story, OP discovers his wife engaged in intimate relations with his cousin while he was absent. The wife and cousin initially deny their actions, but the truth eventually surfaces through a text confession from the cousin. Enraged and heartbroken, the husband confronts his wife and demands she leave, ultimately leading to divorce and impacting the cousin's marriage as well. Now let's get into the story. My wife, 34 female, and I, 42 male, were married for 8 years when I was asked to travel out of state to oversee a company project for months. We talked about it for a few days, but ultimately decided I should go for the pay. Although it would be a challenge to be apart for so long, I was confident my wife and I could get through it without a problem. After 8 years of marriage, we were in our prime time together. One thing was certain, we'd have a wonderful reunion when it was over. For months after I left home, it felt like it had been a year apart from my wife. She felt the same way. The physical separation and lack of emotional intimacy began taking its toll. I struggled to focus at work. It wasn't the same without seeing my wife each night to refuel my willpower to go on. When it came down to about a month left, I was working when I got a text from my married cousin. He said he was sitting outside my house in his car looking for me. He hadn't heard from me for a while, and it wasn't unlike him to make unexpected stops to say hi and catch up. I replied to him without another thought, letting him know I'd be home in about a month. Much to our surprise, I returned home to my wife 1 week later. After our glorious and much-needed reunion, life returned to normal. My wife started to act a little forlorn, like her mind was elsewhere. I was overjoyed to be home, and I figured it was just one of her normal mood fluctuations. Then my cousin knocked on our door. My answer was no. From it, he was holding flowers, smelled fresh, and was clearly dressed to impress. As soon as he saw me, he threw the flowers and ran toward his car. I tackled him and demanded to know why he was here. He said it was the wrong house, but that made no sense. He knew I lived here. He knew my wife lived here. I picked him up by his ear and asked if he was here to woo my wife. Just then she came out screaming, telling me to stop. I asked them both if they saw each other while I was gone. My wife said no, but she was sobbing. I asked what was going on then, and neither of them had a reasonable answer. They denied ever seeing each other without me present. The next day, the flowers were still driving me crazy. If my cousin wasn't here to see my wife, then why? I asked my cousin for the truth over text. I told him I deserved to know and wouldn't harm him, no matter what the truth was. Minutes later, he admitted to everything over text. A week ago, my wife had arrived home to find my cousin waiting in his car. When he told her why he was there, she was smiling and very sweet. She told him I'd be back in a little while and invited him inside for drinks while they waited for me. After a few drinks, she told him that I wasn't really coming home for another month, and it had already been 4. She told him she was lonely and assured him I would never find out if he pleased her until I got back. After they had intimate, she said it was wonderful and I never had to know about it. With my blood boiling, I went to my wife as she cooked dinner and shoved my phone in her face, showing her the text and screaming for her to get out. When she tried to object because she was cooking, I threw the pan across the room. Hot food splattered everywhere, and she started wailing. She said she was sorry that she needed me in her life, and what they did had no emotion behind it whatsoever. I just told her to pack her stuff and get out. Not only had she ruined our marriage, but she also ruined my cousin's marriage. She asked how, implying that she didn't expect my cousin's wife to ever find out. I told her I was going to tell everyone what they did, especially the male participant's wife. She deserved to know as much as me. My wife was beside herself, begging me incoherently not to divorce her. I reasoned with her, saying that it would be heartbreaking to spend another moment in each other's presence. Knowing there was nothing we could do to fix her mistake, everything we had was over and done. Besides that, even if she tried to stay, it would only be a matter of time before I obtained a legal order for her to vacate. She laughed, going through the motions. I told my cousin's wife by forwarding his text with my own addition. I told her he was only at my house to check on me since we hadn't spoken for a while. My wife lied to him to get him in the house, got him to have a few drinks before telling him I wasn't coming, and then told him to have intimate with her. My wife failed to be as honorable and considerate as my cousin attempted to be. Then, when he was presented with this temptation, he fell too. His wife had no mercy and filed for divorce too. He didn't have to have intimate with my wife, he just wanted to.